Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi here on this nice and chilly Monday night here in my area of the Northeast. I hope you all have had a very good day because I have. And we're, as promised earlier, live stream now at a little after 6 o'clock Eastern Time. And we're going to take a look at what's going on with this developing weather pattern across the Atlantic and the blocking situation that we're probably going to see. We are going to see it actually beginning this weekend and beyond, and there are implications of that. We're going to also look at the weather across Europe and the British Isles, and we're also going to take a look at southeastern Canada, I promise, this time around. So why don't we start off. I'm going to switch to... Oh, I'm on my screen, so we're good. All right, great. So let me just move this right over, and we're going to start off with the satellite tonight, which is loaded with clouds all over the place. We don't have any major storms around. We just have a couple of nuisance systems that we're dealing with. And you can see on the loop, there's a lot of cloud cover here in the east. There's a low offshore, and then there's a little sliver of drier air in between another upper air disturbance that's swinging out of the Great Lakes. And if you look closely through southeastern Canada, you can see some higher clouds swinging southeastward. So there's a bit of a push here. There's an upper trough that's going to be swinging on through, and that is going to probably keep us in some cloud cover at least for a while. Not too shabby over Florida and much of the southeast. It looks like you guys had a great day there. You've got clouds back up through Texas and on up into parts of the central plains and even into the western lakes. And we're going to take a look at the west, where we continue to see these systems coming in along the west coast and moving inland, and that's been producing these waves of rain and snow. And there's another arm that's coming in. You can see there's a swirl. There's actually two of them. Three of them, well, no, two. There's probably the other one's off the screen here. But you've got this swirl of clouds with low pressure moving into western Washington, and then there's one right behind it that's dropping southeastward out of the Gulf of Alaska that's going to affect you as we move through the week. A little bit of subtropical moisture coming up into parts of southernmost California. You can see it here with these high clouds, and then there's some moisture also well off the coast that's streaming northward into that swirl of clouds coming in to the Pacific Northwest. So pretty busy pattern out in the western part of the United States. And with respect to what's going on precip-wise, at least as far as the Northeast is concerned, and I'll try and get the national radar loaded up here so tomorrow we'll be able to look elsewhere. But we had some rain very early today. That's all now moved to the east, and there is snow going on through parts of Maine at the moment, but that's rapidly diminishing as this weather system moves out slightly further east, but it's going to hang around close enough to the coast during the day tomorrow that we're going to deal with some clouds getting thrown back toward the coastline around Long Island, New York City, and into southern New England. So where are we going with all this? Well, we've got this block that's going to be setting up, but let's start first off with the surface map and the weather as we go through this week. And you can watch the date and time across the top. I'm going to start moving maps around, and you'll see. Let me just. I want to make see it. I'm watching your chat at the same time. Yes, Pandaz, I'll work on the Ohio snow angle for you, I promise. So here we go with the latest GFS run, and you'll notice that really from coast to coast, again, except for the northwest, there really isn't too much weather going on. You do start to get showers blossoming out by Wednesday, and there is another cold front that's setting up across the western lakes, and another bubble of high pressure and colder air behind it. And in the west, you've got this low that comes in, another one of those arms moving inland with rain and snow. Those showers, as they move to the east, kind of fall apart as we move into Thursday, as the front weakens. Low pressure moving across southeastern Canada That moves out, and actually a little wave develops off the coast on Thursday. That's where the model starts to produce a little precip, and we move that out of the way for Thursday afternoon. And now we set up for the stronger front for Saturday, as low pressure comes out of the Central Plains and heads up toward the Great Lakes and intensifies, and you can see increasing snow for parts of Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. Weather kind of calms down out in the west now as we start to see that trough deepen in the east. The ridge builds in the west. This front moves on through with some showers on Saturday, and now we're going to start to get into the colder air behind it in the Midwest and Northeast Sunday and into Thanksgiving week. Now, one of the things I want to watch for on Sunday is that there might be a second little disturbance that'll come around in the flow, and that could probably trigger off, certainly will trigger off some lake effect snows, and it might even trigger off a few snow showers along the coast as that goes by. And then we'll get that out of the way, and then the first part of Thanksgiving week does look dry. We do have some rain and snow into the northern Rockies because of the ridge that's going to be, the ridge generally being in the west. A little bit of warmer air works its way up into the western part of the U.S., and all the cold air comes to the east. Now, there's been all kinds of chatter with regards to later next week, and you know, run to run on the GFS is really, as far as the surface is concerned, is not important. I think what's important is that we get a sense of what's going on in the upper layers of the atmosphere with regards to the pattern for next week, because with the block around, it kind of makes looking at this, the surface maps, a bit silly, especially beyond Monday or Tuesday of next week. It's just not really reflecting what's happening. And you know, I want, at least for the young Mets out there that are watching this, it's really the most important thing is to get a flavor of what is happening with the upper pattern before you start really digging into what the surface is doing. The upper pattern is really the most important thing to focus on. And here we have it with the jet stream at the moment, which is pretty much this west to east flow across southern Canada and the United States. You can see the deep low that's off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and that is the next system, of course, that comes inland there. You've got a trough that swings through the east with the cold front on Thursday, and here's that what sets up now for the weekend, where you have this strong trough in the east. All of that happening, by the way, as you look up in the North Atlantic, pressures and heights are building as this block develops, and the block's function is to suppress the jet stream much further south than it usually is. So if you follow the tight lines, the tighter those lines are together, that's where your stronger winds are in the upper layers of the atmosphere. The higher pressures in Canada have now forced the jet stream down through the Pacific into the western part of the United States, where there's a ridge, and so the winds go southwesterly and then turn sharply southward, north to south, around this deep upper low that forms near James Bay. That's your cold air mechanism, drawing down cold air from central Canada into the eastern part of the United States. The air with this is probably going to wind up being maybe as cold as the last air mass, or perhaps at the surface it might be a shade less cold, but relative to normal. But the upper air features are very dynamic here. So the key going forward in the upper pattern as we go into next week is the block. And blocks on weather models are very unstable. They change from run to run in a large way, either by strength or position. Now, what is the bottom line is that the building upper high near Greenland is going to prevent this vortex in eastern Canada from moving in its natural west to east way. That, if it were to do that, then what would happen is eventually a ridge would pop up in the eastern part of the United States. But instead, it's forced to sit there and rotate around, and then you get another arm. So you can see on the GFS by Tuesday night, there's another trough that's developing from the western lakes down into the central Gulf as that upper low rotates around under the block, and then another trough swings through the east around Thanksgiving. Now, with respect to anything that we're going to get as far as development is concerned, and whether there might be a rain or snow threat out of this, is really going to depend ultimately on the position of the block and where that trough sets up and how deep it is. You know, one of the things that you have to watch out for in a situation like this is that are we going to see a trough far enough to the west, or is the upper low going to get stuck somewhere in southeastern Canada where it basically creates a overwhelming of cold air in the eastern part of the United States, which is what the European argued today, that it would just wind up being cold and dry. The GFS has been kind of going back and forth on this idea. It's leaning more to the idea that there could be some sort of an event, but we still aren't really going to know how it's going to come out. And as we go through the long range, you know, there's still some semblance of blocking. Part of that upper low is going to pull out, but part of it's going to want to hang back. And you can see there are a couple of systems here on this particular run that come in from the Pacific and work their way across the southern part of the jet stream as we go toward the end of the month. But that's long-term speculation, and I'm not going to really get too wrapped up in all of that. So it's a fairly dynamic pattern going forward. Whether something happens out of this or not remains to be seen, but we're going to be following this for many days and days, and we will, of course, stay on top of things for you. Now, as far as southeastern Canada is concerned, we'll take you on a ride across southeastern Canada for those of you who are watching from the Canadian Maritimes. I know you like seeing these maps. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller so you can get the bottom of it a bit better. I think that'll work. And you can watch through time as we go through this week. So we do have today's low passing by to the south with some rain in Nova Scotia. But weather looks fairly calm until we get a system here on Thursday that the model does wrap up into a fairly intense little low as it approaches Nova Scotia, and then that moves out to the east, and you can see some snows that develop from there. And here's your stronger system for the weekend. We watch this arm lifting up with rain and then some snow on the back side. So while the cold air is pouring into the Great Lakes and Northeast, you're dealing with an initial warming before you start to get colder. And moving through our Thanksgiving week next week, we've got another weather system toward the end of the week with some rain, and then it looks like a couple of lows will be going by to your south in the longer range as we go way out. But again, that is always subject to some big changes. It doesn't seem like there's any major events, but I want to watch that thing for Thursday of this week if the GFS is right in developing that low into a fairly intense little low as it heads towards Nova Scotia. Now, we'll go to our friends across the pond into Europe, and we'll take a look. And starting out with this low in the Mediterranean Sea, conditions across much of Western Europe dry, a little bit of action coming into the British Isles. Now, there's one wild card in all of this, is we do have a system south of the Azores that could become a subtropical storm, so we're going to watch that. The remnants of that would probably be moving in late this week if that were the case. But as we move through, I kind of lost track here. Let me just back up a second here. Let me go back. We've got this system that comes through on Wednesday night producing some snows up in northern Scotland. And then we have another wave of moisture here over the weekend on Sunday with rain, and that moves out. And then we have another one as we go into Wednesday. Now this one looks like it's a wrapped up one, a little bit more of a wrapped up system coming up from the southwest and then moves northward. So the model is trying to show at least through days 8, 9, and 10 that there'll be a prolonged period of rain up along the British Isles and for Ireland. Let's look at your snowfall map, because I know you guys like to see that. And it looks like some snows out over the 10-day period. I'm sure I got the last day. over parts of northern Scotland. One of the earlier model runs actually had some snow down into parts of northeastern England. So we'll have to watch to see if that's the case. And you can see the snowfall gets fairly extensive over the next 10-day period across Poland and into Eastern Europe, and then of course usually in the mountainous areas down. You get into southern half of Germany, southern Poland, and on up to Austria and so on. But you know, no big storms here that are being indicated except for what was going to be going on out in the Atlantic. Again, we're going to want to keep our eyes on that subtropical system to see how that plays. And with respect to snow over the 10 days in the United States, so here you have the U.S., just to come back to this, and again, the model is going to be terrible in terms of the actual amounts, but what I would look at this, and you can see the flavor of where the model wants to put down additional snow cover. I think that's pretty reasonable. Still having a fair amount of snow cover coming in, additional snow cover in the northern Rockies and on up in the Northwest, but this is going to be front end loaded. You'll probably see the bulk of this in the first 5 days, and in the east, the snow that's being indicated is back end loaded, so maybe for the second 5 days. And when we go a little tighter on the northeast, the snow that you see being forecasted here for northwestern Pennsylvania, northeastern Ohio, and on up through parts of upstate New York, this is all going to be lake effect, and I think you're going to probably see a fair amount of lake effect snow happening this weekend as this next storm system plays out for Saturday and beyond. So I'm going to be, the early part of the winter is well, let me just backtrack a second. Forecasting through the winter time is always difficult, but the early and the end are usually the toughest, because the first snow, you're still kind of dealing with the change of season, so the atmosphere wants to kind of hang on to that warm air, so it makes it a little bit tough from a practical standpoint in trying to forecast the first snows. And from my end of it, you really want to get it right. And in the spring, and you get to late winter in the spring, you're fighting it in the other direction, so that makes it also equally problematic. But you have challenges here. So let me give a collective hi to everybody. All the regulars seem to be here, and a few folks that were gone for a while in the back, like Anne-Marie is here, and Pandaz popped in. Leon's always here. Cynthia Guignadas is here. Raymond, of course, is always here, and it's always good to see you guys. Jake points out the West Coast is going to be calming down because of the blocking pattern. That's correct, Jake. You're going to have this trough. The troughing is in the east. You're going to have that upper low that's sitting in southeastern Canada. So while you have this trough in the east that's going to be blocked from repositioning itself and getting reinforced over time, the west is going to go into more of a ridge position. Now, we're going to have to watch to see whether something might want to try to crash that ridge in some fashion. The flow in the Pacific still shows a pretty strong Pacific jet, so that may eventually try and penetrate the bottom part of that ridge over time. That's something we'll keep an eye on. And remember, blocks are very unstable on the models. Models have a tough time with them, and it's going to change quite a bit in terms of our profile, but in terms of what the day-to-day is in the east. But as long as we have an understanding of that, and the fact that an understanding of the overall pattern and what could come out, we're going to be watching it closely. Southern Indiana talking about severe weather Friday into Saturday. Well, that's that strong cold front and that low that's going to be deepening into the Great Lakes. I would not be surprised to see some heavy downpours and maybe even a couple of thunderstorms. I mean, I don't know how widespread a severe weather event you're going to get, but you may get some thunderstorm activity out of that, Cynthia, as that front moves on through. Kendall Bailey, snow in Michigan and Thanksgiving. Well, you know what? You're going to be in a pattern where you're probably going to, at the very least, get some lake effect action going on, so I wouldn't be surprised. Now, whether you have, some kind of low that gets involved that comes out from the southwest, or perhaps drops from the northwest and then goes down into the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, that remains to be seen. And the pattern for you is not that unfavorable. Certainly, you're going to have the cold part of the equation. So let me see. Anthony Orr. Been noted a few times that the storm on 29th got the ball rolling. Would have it changed without it? You know, I really am of the opinion that that storm was critical in getting everything underway. Without that developing, and maybe the fact that it absorbed Tropical Storm Philippe and gave it that kind of extra added juice, perhaps that precipitated the pattern change. So maybe the question might be that had Tropical Storm Philippe not formed and not get involved, would the pattern change have happened? That would be open to question. But I certainly think that the juice that storm gave it, that extra added juice, might have really, maybe if there was like a tipping point where the pattern would have changed or won't have changed, maybe the tropical system wound up producing that tipping point and having it happen. Let's see. Of course, James Trumbull, you're quite welcome for the video. And hey, Jacob. Could snow be seen in New Jersey because of the lake effect, snow being extreme? Danilo. No, but what you could have, I don't know if the lake effect is going to be extreme, but I think it could be, you know, it could be an interesting lake effect event. We'll have to look at that as we get closer. But there could be a disturbance that swings around the upper low that would be producing the lake effect that might bring some snow showers over the mountains, and maybe, you know, sometimes that does happen, particularly in northwest New Jersey. You get these snow squalls that come in from the Great Lakes, and you know, if you got a good impulse in the upper atmosphere, it'll survive the trip over the mountains, and you get what would be the equivalent of a summertime line of showers going by, except that there'll be snow showers, and sometimes they will be heavy. Kendall, Bailey, I just talked about Michigan with snow for Thanksgiving weekend. I think you certainly could have some lake effect going on, and the pattern will be cold enough. Now, whether it sets up for something or not remains to be seen. I think that's a short-range forecast question, and we'll, of course, look at it as we always do on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, Danilo, we do get those from time to time. They make it down to the coastline. Under certain conditions. I actually in my own forecast did include that possibility of it happening on Sunday, but in the meantime, you know, I'm going to be paying close attention to what happens after Sunday. I know a lot of folks are already, and there's all sorts of stuff already popping up on social media, you know, and putting up a map from a model run. We can all look at it and see what it does, and then you have the next model run do something different. Rather than go through that sort of emotional exercise, I suggest that the better thing to do is get a flavor for the overall pattern in terms of what's going on in the upper atmosphere, and worry about the specifics when we get inside that 5 to 7 day range, and not really pay too much attention to what the models do in the 7 day range and beyond, because they're going to be all over the place, okay? And they're going to range from all sorts of things, from coastal lows to lows with cold fronts in the Great Lakes. I mean, that's what kind of happened today and over the last 2 days with how these models go. Brandon wants to know if there could be another tropical storm formation. Well, you know, the system that's out in the Atlantic, that's south of the Azores, I think has a shot for becoming at least a subtropical storm. And they're, you know, the models have been showing now for almost 2 weeks something trying to form in the Southwest Caribbean, but it never seems to happen. So I suppose that there is room for one more, but I don't think there's room for any kind of threat to the U.S. mainland. I just don't see it. We just, you know, you might get something that eventually maybe moisture gets involved with something else that's going on upstream, but you know, as far as anything else, you know, in the Caribbean, Southwest Caribbean in particular, it might be a different story. But I'm not really that confident in terms of what the models have been doing down there, because as I just said, they have been forecasting a tropical system to develop in the Southwest Caribbean now for the last 2 weeks, and even though pressures are low, nothing seems to be being able to get going down there. So you know what? If it happens, we'll deal with it. If it doesn't happen, then it's done. The first storm, so for northeastern New Jersey, well, I don't know when that will be, but I will say this. If we hold on to this blocking pattern for the rest of this month and going into the month of December, I think the chances of getting a December snowfall and maybe an early December snowfall would be higher than it otherwise would be. When you go back to winters that have started early, the signature is usually with some early signs of blocking. So if you want to see an early snowfall, you are going to you're going to have the right pattern for it. Now, whether something happens or not, that's a whole nother matter. And yes, Anthony Orr, as you point out, at one point, Philippe did have multiple circulations when it was in its developing phase. Ryan Ford, are there any model trends that are suggesting weaker blocking, therefore snowstorm threat for the East Coast? Well, I don't know if you want weaker blocking or stronger blocking. The trend toward blocking is there. Again, whether something develops out of that is we can, certainly I could look at that and say, and I could see how something could happen. When I look at the upper air pattern, I can visualize how something could happen if the models are deeper with the trough, or maybe a little bit further west with it, a little sharper as it comes around. And certainly those possibilities are there. But as far as saying that with any kind of confidence at this point, I couldn't do because there's just too much fluidness. We're too far away. We're talking 8, 9, 10 days away from anything. And again, each model run's going to do its own thing. So why get emotionally wrapped up? If one model run comes in now and shows a snowstorm, are you going to believe it? Are you going to forecast that based on that? No. So that's why it's sort of an exercise in futility. But the upper air can certainly suggest a possibility if other factors come into play and the atmosphere, let's say for those of you who want to see an early snow, if the atmosphere cooperates in a certain way. A block in the southeastern U.S. Well, no, the blocking is in reference to the upper air pattern, Pandez, that goes up in the North Atlantic, or sometimes across Canada. You get blocking highs. You don't have a jet stream pattern that gets suppressed down into all the way in the Caribbean. That would let you call it a block. I mean, a high off the southeast coast is a ridge, and that would mean a southwest flow along in the eastern part of the United States. And I agree with you, Bobcat. The snowstorm chances in November are higher than the Giants winning a game. Exactly, especially after yesterday's performance. Let's see. Do you know if Oxidar Lake, Orion, Michigan are going to get snow? I don't know where Lake Orion is. Kendall, are you in northern Michigan or south? Can you give me the name of a big city that's near? I think that would be that would help me better. As far as giving you a guess. Okie AG, whenever I see snow here, I change the channel. I've seen enough in the snow belts of Lake of Erie for a lifetime. I bet you have. One of these days I'm going to get up there in part of the lake effect land because I have never seen it. I'd like to experience it over a couple of days just to say that I've lived through it. Wisconsin this weekend, Trish and Lou. With that low going into the lakes, you'll get either some lake effect or you might get some snow on the backside of the low as some colder air comes in, particularly if you're in central and northern Wisconsin. Let's see. I think I got a run for all your questions. Very good. All right, folks. We're going to stop it right here, and I appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much. Had 2 live streams today. So tomorrow I will guarantee you there will not be 2 live streams because I have a presentation tomorrow morning to give to a group of folks over at near Malloy College on Long Island. So there will be no morning live stream, but there will be a live stream tomorrow evening, hopefully right after 6 o'clock. We'll keep it on schedule. In the meantime, you know where to go. Website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com and Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com. And by the way, check out the Joe Stradamus store, because it's almost time to Christmas shop, and you could pick up a few odds and ends for that weather geek that's a fan of my channel. All right, have a great rest of your day, folks. Okay, one real fast, Bobcat. Do I plan on doing videos every day in the future? Or do you think maybe a couple of videos a week, based on not needing to do? But I like doing them once a day. I think through the winter and into the early spring, I will continue to do, you know, at least one live stream a day. When the weather gets active, if I have time, I will try to do a couple to keep you updated. But I've been trying to stick to this at least once a day live stream schedule of mine, and it's working so far. So as long as my personal schedule holds on and things don't get in the way, we will stay with that. All right, folks, have a great rest of your Monday evening, and we will see you tomorrow.